Just imagine, a dirt road lost in the fog, and in the middle of nowhere, a man steps off a bus, carrying an old suitcase and a look that's completely adrift. That's Miguel, or at least, that's what he has to call himself now. Yesterday, he was Sao Paulo's most promising lawyer. Today, he's running from everything and everyone, terrified he'll be seen as a criminal for something he never did. The moment he arrives in the village, the calluses on his fingers, calloused from a pen, not a shovel, already give away that he doesn't belong. Across the square, Ana watches. She doesn't trust strangers, but her generous heart can't ignore that outsider with his sad eyes. It doesn't take long for the first shock. While Miguel almost loses his patience with the bureaucracy of the community school, Ana, steady, asks for his help. Is she wary, or is this a chance? And in that very moment, side by side in a dim hallway at the school, after a stumble and a shy plea for help, their eyes truly meet. Can someone so wounded ever trust again? Will Miguel overcome his own barriers? Or will he give in to the fear of being discovered? If you want to know how two worlds, completely apart, might collide, and maybe find a new start together, stay right here and join us for the story. It was pouring when Miguel got off the bus, a heavy, soaking rain that cut through the cold and pooled on the broken tarmac of that narrow road. The driver didn't even bother to ask if he was sure, just opened the bus door and waited for him to jump out, carrying almost nothing but a drenched backpack, a thick coat, and eyes searching for shelter deep inside himself. His hat pulled low, his beard unkempt, tension written all over his face. No one there recognized him, but no one hid their curiosity either. The few people rushing by under bright umbrellas glanced at him sideways, hardly realizing they were doing it. The village smelled of wet earth. Everything moved slower. Each sound seemed to ripple outward. The wind made the windows rattle. The big plane trees rustled and flung down droplets, the noise nearly musical. The muddy street sank under his worn-out boots. He paused for a second in front of the corner store, half praying not to draw attention. Inside the glass, Mrs. Odette watched, her plump hand settling on the counter as if determined to fix that image in her mind. There was expectation in the air, as if everyone instinctively knew that strangers didn't just appear there by accident. Miguel felt cold and hungry at the same time, but more than either, a kind of shame. That's what it was, shame. He, who'd defended so many people, was now just another man trying to look normal in a place where no one had anything to hide. The silence pressed down here in a way entirely unlike Sao Paulo. There, the crowd drowned out all loneliness. Here, every step echoed. Each breath seemed to expose what was inside. He slipped into the boarding house without a word. The bell on the door gave a shy little trill. Mrs. Rita, wiry and wrinkled, looked up from her crochet just long enough to measure him up and down, slow, suspicious, but with eyes that had seen everything life could bring. He asked for a room, his voice raspy, nearly hoarse, not meeting her gaze. All he wanted was to sleep, to disappear from the world. She opened a drawer, grabbed a key, nudged a sleeping cat off the stairs, and pointed the way. Room number 3, window facing the backyard, damp smell, an extra blanket. Breakfast is at 7. Keep it down. Everyone wakes up early around here. Miguel let the backpack slide off his shoulders as soon as he stepped into the room. The old spring mattress sagged beneath his tired body. He stared at the cracked wall, took a deep breath. The silence was heavy, the kind that drives you inward. No sirens, no commotion, just the sound of rain insisting on the roof. One question hammered at him. How long would it take for this town to forget him? Was it even possible to disappear? Or would they forever remember him by another name, the one from the newspapers, the one splashed in scandals? He no longer knew who he was. And he couldn't say. The mirror in the room showed someone else, hollow eyes that had lost more than a few nights' sleep. His beard growing messier than before, his skin drained of color. He tried to straighten himself up, but ended up laughing, joyless, at his own reflection. Miguel Vasconcellos, in the newspaper, used to look sharp. Here, he was just a survivor. He thought of his parents, their apartment, the routine he'd lost forever. He thought of the empty office, files piled high. His chest ached, maybe even colder than the rain outside. He missed the sound of cars on Paulista Avenue, a stupid argument, someone calling his name at the bakery. Now he was only silence. And fear. In the village, time moved slow. The street lamp outside flickered, catching the raindrops on the glass, fat and nearly perfect. Suddenly, the laughter of children passing in the street, two siblings, soaked, sharing a single tattered umbrella. An old man waved from the barber shop, unhurried, sitting on a plastic chair. Everyone knew everyone here. No one knew him. And that, strangely, was as scary as it was comforting. Miguel lay down without even taking his coat off, feeling the weight of wet clothes. The rain smell clung to his skin. For a second, he thought of crying, but nothing came. Just a slower breath, almost surrendering. He asked himself if he would ever feel whole again, or if this was just the start of a half-lived life. When his stomach growled, he went downstairs again, moving quietly through the corridor lined with old picture frames. In the dining room, a table set just for him. He stood out, even trying hard to be invisible. Mrs. Rita set a hot bowl in front of him. Thick soup, fresh bread. No conversation. But her gaze, before heading back to the kitchen, lingered, sizing up the new man. He almost said thank you, but nothing came out. With every spoonful, Miguel felt the food warming a place he'd almost forgotten existed. The silence pressed in again, broken only by the old clock on the wall marking a time no one here was in a hurry to spend. His shoulders, his jaw, his whole body finally eased, just a little. And at the same time, the fear that someone might walk in at any moment and point at him. I know who you are. But it didn't happen. That first night, Miguel realized something. Being alone had never been this hard. He watched the people, their hands, rough and worn, but gentle with each other. Watched their eyes meet, despite so many unasked questions. He wasn't part of that place, but he wanted to be, or needed to be. He didn't know anymore. He had trouble falling asleep. Heard thunder in the night, water rushing in the pipes. Dreamed of Sao Paulo, of accusing voices, newspapers strewn across the courtroom floor. He woke before dawn, sweating with nerves. And for the first time in years, wished that the day would take its sweet time becoming tomorrow. If only to put off facing those wary, silent, piercing eyes again, eyes that seemed to know everything even when nothing was said. I remember that early morning as if I were watching from outside, you know? It was early and still cold. That stubborn chill that small houses can't keep out. The village seemed frozen in time, almost mute, but at the school, something pulsed. The iron gate was open and Miguel stood off in the distance, watching Ana Beatriz. He had that feeling of not belonging, completely out of place, his clothes different, his eyes lost. Around him, the ground was still soaked from last night's rain, thick with the scent of earth, and every step sunk a little, leaving tracks easy to follow. Ana had her back to him, fiddling with boxes of supplies. Every so often she glanced at the street and smoothed her hair without noticing. The children began to arrive slowly, bringing in their backpack stories of homes without electricity and clothes still half damp. I saw a tiny girl shivering, inching her way across the floor to the teacher, who knelt and opened her arms, a reserved smile, but no less real. Only those who felt pain can hide it so well. Anna's hug was swift, but had all the warmth missing in the world. She didn't ask if the night had been bad. She just clutched her gently, ran her hand through the girl's hair, and let her in. Miguel's stomach twisted watching this. Outside the gate, he pulled at his own coat, wondering how a person could be so strong and, at the same time, so light. He didn't know yet, but that sort of kindness hurt him. He was used to the harshness of court, sharp words. Every minute counted on a wristwatch. When the third child skidded at the entrance, Miguel steeled himself. He hurried over, moving with too much purpose. "Let me help," he said, hands outstretched for the backpacks. The silence stretched, and he felt every pair of eyes on him, the children pausing, maybe waiting for some sign from Ana. She looked at him without smiling, only with that calm that's almost a challenge. It wasn't disdain, it was calculation. People are suspicious here when help comes too easily. Ana lifted her chin, voice soft but steady. "No need, thank you. The children know where to put them. Here, we do everything together, but everyone has their own pace." Miguel felt a prick of shame, even though no one laughed or judged out loud. He wanted to be useful, but it dawned on him. It was a weird mix. Good intentions, a desire to fit in, but a little bit of arrogance too. He'd spent a lifetime fixing things, taking charge, but here, no one was asking for speed. The next few minutes felt like hours. He lingered nearby, uneasy in his own skin. He noticed every move. Anna grabbing a rag to wipe the table, the blond boy waiting for permission to enter, the cook gliding down the corridor nearly unseen. The classroom was half full when Miguel leaned on the door, just a sliver open between him and the life unfolding inside. The voices suddenly softened. He felt a childlike urge to go in and try again. Anna's quick glance caught him. She hesitated. Miguel even thought she'd invite him in, but no. She just bent back over the children and pretended he wasn't there. He realized then, doors in this village don't open just because you want them to. You have to earn it. Deep down, Miguel understood. Nobody here hands out applause to outsiders for free. Reputation is earned, little by little, conversation by conversation, eye by eye. Anna smiled more with her eyes than her mouth. She moved around each desk, straightening pencils, giving everyone equal attention. Miguel found himself admiring her. The courage to be firm, the care not to overdo the tenderness so as not to call attention to what she couldn't provide. The older boys straightened up, joked around, looked at her with a mix of respect and a longing for comfort. Time seemed to run slower inside that classroom. Anna scolded a group of mischief makers. She didn't raise her voice, but somehow it was even more effective, sober, decisive. Miguel thought of his mother. The feeling of being seen, but expected to do better. Among the desks, the teacher picked up a forgotten note, read it silently, stowed it away without a flicker of emotion. She carried marks of the past, lessons learned the hard way. To trust is to risk getting hurt. He noticed Anna had her own secrets, tightly guarded. Miguel wasn't just the fugitive lawyer anymore. He felt like a boy in detention, looking in on the school from outside, wanting to be accepted but not knowing how. His head was spinning, recalling his past mistakes. How? In the big city, solving problems was a matter of giving orders, not partnership. At the end of the morning, Anna went to fetch some books from the storage room. She left the door ajar. Miguel stood by, sharing the chill shade with the warmth coming from the voices inside. He wanted to ask if he could help, but hesitated. Maybe learning to wait was today's lesson. She returned, and their eyes met. They didn't say anything. This time, the silence was different. It wasn't hostile, but it wasn't exactly welcoming either. It was a threshold, a chance, maybe, to start slowly. Anna's eyes held just a hint of hope. In Miguel's, a silent plea, "Let me stay." There, under that overcast morning, the distance between them was exactly as wide as the fear each of them carried. But, without bridging that gap, a small measure of respect began to grow, almost unseen, in that tense space between the closed door and the warmth of the classroom. And for the first time, the outsider felt that maybe, standing on the outside looking in, he could start over here, too. I never quite understood why people in the countryside are so fond of long meals, full of stories and careful looks. That night, at Dona Lourdes's dinner table, I got it. It's not about the food, it's a test. That's where they decide if you'll get accepted or watch forever. The table was set with an outrageous amount of food, almost as if proving hospitality was some kind of contest. Fluffy rice, thick beans, free-range chicken, a farofa I didn't even know where to begin with. The smell of the food mixed with the delicate scent of some dried plant in an old vase. But the strongest thing in the air was the smell of the people, the scent of unspoken questions and easy laughter trying to cover up suspicion. Dona Lourdes was one of those women with a heavy hand and a sweet voice. She spoke like someone always ready to correct you, but smiled first, just to put you at ease. She was the one who coaxed me into this dinner, saying you can't trust someone who refuses food made with care. I didn't know how to refuse without looking strange, and I guess that's where exile starts. Longing slowly turns you obedient. Around the table, neighbors poured in, full of themselves. Rosanya, with her bright scarf and too bold lipstick, never stopped talking. Teresa, dark-eyed and quieter, just watched, but she seemed to see everything. And Anna brought in a dish of vegetables from the backyard and kept to herself, no rush. Her look was always the hardest to meet. She had a strength that unraveled my certainties. At first, the laughter was easy, almost rehearsed. Rosanya told stories about the village, about times the river swelled so much it swallowed the road, about kids hiding out in the barn to skip school. Every story was loaded with an inside joke. They'd laugh, checking to see if I was in on the joke only folks who'd known each other all their lives could get. Sometimes I laughed along, pretending to understand. Other times, I just smiled, wishing I could disappear. A chill ran through me. It was like being in a play where the protagonist doesn't really know his role. The voices piled up, and then came the questions. Where was I from exactly? How long did I plan to stay? Was my family large or important? Did I know anything about animals, farming, heavy rain? I answered what I could. Changed the subject as quickly as my hand squeezed the fork until it almost bent. They listened to it all, but only believed what matched their intuition. But what wasn't said out loud was heavier. What did they see in me that didn't fit in this town? The way I looked at the corners, fidgeted with my hands before speaking, listened more than I interrupted. My accent, especially, I tried to slow down, but the big city leaked out in every word. It was in the silences that everything really happened. An extra sip of coffee, a fork clinking against the table, the smell of toast drifting through the still air. With every pause, I imagined each of them thinking, "Who is this guy?" And the fear of being discovered mixed with the ache for home, for talk about soccer, for my mother's laugh when I came home late. Longing hits hardest on cold nights, but in the warmth of that kitchen, it was another kind of loneliness. Surrounded by people, you still feel like you're hiding all that matters. I caught myself staring out the window, the darkness outside feeling safer than any question. And then there was Anna. She looked at me differently than the rest. It wasn't pure suspicion. It was like she was waiting for the right moment to ask the real question. But she didn't let anything slide, either. When Dona Lourdes mentioned I should work in the fields, Anna cut in. "He's got the hands of someone who's never touched a hoe, Mom." The way she said it, not accusing or protecting, just stating the fact, made me feel small. In the few moments our eyes met, it was as if she saw right past my false name. I wondered if she'd ever had to lie about who she was, too. If she knew the price of inventing a routine just to go unnoticed. Halfway through the night, while everyone was laughing at some old joke, my mind wandered. I thought of Sao Paulo's horns blaring at 7 p.m., the smell of the office after rain, the tense elevator silence in the building where I used to work. None of that existed here, but inside me it all clung to my skin. The food slowly disappeared from the plates, and the questions turned to nearly inaudible whispers. Rosanya got up for more coffee. I caught Teresa watching my hands, maybe checking for marks, dirt, a story. Anna got up and started washing dishes, as if she'd decided the show was over. When dinner ended, Dona Lourdes hugged me tight. It wasn't just affection. It was like a temporary goodbye, the kind that says, "We'll see tomorrow if you come back." I went to thank her and could barely meet her eyes, a knot in my chest too heavy for any words. Outside, the air was cold. The walk home seemed darker than ever. I walked slowly, trying to remember how to breathe properly when you're no longer sure who you are. Deep down, I knew. Those questions had been easy. The real fear isn't that someone will discover your secret, but that, they're among those simple people, somebody might see your pain before you have the chance to explain. And that night, I had the strange feeling that Anna already did. A fine rain was falling. Not much, just enough to thicken the smell of earth and darken the grass around the school. Miguel arrived early, hands buried in his pockets, shoulders stiff, hair damp. He didn't know exactly why he'd agreed to help. Maybe to keep his mind busy, maybe because Anna had asked in that quiet way, not meeting his eyes, but her voice almost steady, a little bit challenging. Like she was saying, "Let's see who you really are." The school was an old building, peeling walls, tall windows, battered benches. The yard was empty, just some buckets and tools by the door. Anna was already there, alone, tying her hair into a messy bun, looking tired. She didn't smile when she saw Miguel, just lowered her head and nodded toward the pile of wooden boards leaning on the gate. "You can start sanding those. The kids are always getting splinters." Her tone was calm, but not exactly welcoming. There was a distance there, as if she'd said good morning and good afternoon to someone only in town by chance. Miguel took the sandpaper without a word, sat on the step, turned the wood in his hands, started the repetitive motion. He breathed deep, awkward in his too neat clothes, still more office worker than laborer, shoehorned into a world that wasn't his. The scent of old paint and damp dust stuck in his throat. The silence between them was heavy, almost noisy. She inside, organizing supplies. He out in the yard, sometimes watching the rain spatter on a bike tire leaning against the wall. He wanted to say something, mention the cold, the stubbornness of that rain that could last a week without ever turning into a storm. But nothing came out. Anna reappeared with brushes and a can of white paint, standing close. Not close enough to touch, but enough that he could smell her soap in the muggy air. Miguel turned away, embarrassed to notice this kind of detail. "When you're done sanding, help me paint that corner by the gate. If you want." Her words lingered in the air, a half-hearted invitation. Miguel nodded, quiet. She lingered, fidgeting with the brushes. Then she asked, curt, eyes averted, "Have you ever done this kind of work?" Miguel gave a sideways grin, almost laughed, but stopped himself. "Nothing with wood or paint. Just paper, pens, and, I don't know, computers." Anna paused a few seconds before replying. "You learn by doing. That's how things work here." It sounded like she wanted to say more, but held back. She walked toward the school door, tapping her sneaker to shake off the dirt. He watched the quick, almost absent-minded gesture, and for a moment, thought how even her practical details were beautiful, matter-of-fact, nothing spare, but with a hidden gentleness. The rhythm of sanding became almost a chant. Miguel thought of Sao Paulo, of the office coffee smell, of tense meetings. The tightness in his chest. Here, time dragged. He looked around, oddly unsettled that no one seemed to care who he really was. But Anna knew. She knew he wasn't just a stranger looking for work. She could see deeper, in his guarded eyes, his contained manner. Every now and then, he'd feel her glance on his back, fleeting, as if she was forcing herself to keep watch in case of an accident. Or maybe, to see if he really meant to fit in here. Gradually, their silence shifted. It didn't feel lighter, exactly, but it got more familiar. Just the sound of sanding, Anna shuffling through old books and supplies, tiny cracks in the wood, wind rattling a window. Miguel began to relax. This wasn't so hard. He'd get dirty, his arms would ache, but he'd have done something that didn't depend on looks, or resume, or what he'd been before. Anna appeared at the door, bundled in a thick coat, paint stains on her fingertips. She was carrying a ladder in one hand. "Can you help me here? Better for you to climb. I don't trust this ladder, but it needs to be fixed." Miguel dropped the sandpaper, wiped his hands on his jeans. He felt a scratchy anxiety in his chest, scared to fall, scared to look foolish, scared to fail in front of her. But he went, climbing carefully. Anna held the ladder's base, steady, not looking up, just fixing her gaze on the wall, hands steady on the old wood. When he almost lost his balance, she called out, "Careful," a little loudly, and he felt her fingers clamp around his ankle. Firm, just a second, long enough for two hearts to pound louder than they should. He stood there, frozen a few moments. Her touch burned his skin, even with the chill. Miguel climbed down, laughing awkwardly. Tried to apologize. "I'm way out of practice with this, you know." Anna finally smiled, a little, holding in a laugh. And in that smile was something like approval, or at least camaraderie. It was the first time she'd seen weakness in him, and she liked knowing someone strong was also human. They spent hours like that, each in their own quiet, curious inside, wary outside. When the rain got heavier, Miguel taped a leaky window shut. Anna brought out 2 mugs of coffee, sat close, both of them silent on the floor. The quiet between them spoke more than any conversation. It was silence weighed with questions, fears, the urge to trust, and a small bit of hope, the kind that only grows slow. Miguel held his mug with both hands, taking warmth from it. Anna looked at him intently, as if measuring whether she'd let him in. He felt his chest warming, a sudden urge to confess, to ask for help, to say thank you without a reason. But he stayed quiet. Because sometimes, love starts in the things you don't say, and they seemed to know that, even if they wouldn't admit it. The afternoon ended with promises of more days just like this, small chores and fixes. And on the way back home, as the rain faded, Miguel smiled to himself for the first time in a long, long while. If there's something no one ever tells you about starting over, it's the noise of silence. Not the good, peaceful kind, but the sort that makes every memory scream louder. And that afternoon, the silence between Miguel and Anna was just like that, awkward, curious. The two of them, together in the school storeroom, fresh paint in the air, old dust, putting away tools after hours of repairs. Outside, the sky was tired already, orange fading into gray, as the light slipped away. Miguel wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. He noticed that Anna was avoiding his eyes, not out of fear, but as if she was quietly measuring how far she could push things. He didn't know where to start either. It was always easier to talk about hammers and paint than about himself. The wooden floor creaked with every step they took. On the workbench, the tins of nails gave off a soft metallic clatter. These were the kind of details he had time to notice here, so different from the city, where everything was always too urgent. Anna picked up a box of screws, closed it gently, and set it against the wall. The way she handled things was delicate, like she was storing away not just objects but the pieces of a story no one else could see. For a moment, she just stared at her own hands, motionless, until she let out a sigh. Miguel wanted to say something that might crack open the heavy silence between them. But the words caught in his throat, afraid he might reveal too much. He decided to take it slow, so he risked, "Don't you ever get tired of all this?" Anna smiled, that small smile you only see when someone really likes you but still doesn't let themselves show it. She glanced at him out of the corner of her eye, big dark eyes full of more secrets than he could ever guess. "There are days I do, yeah? But it's a good kind of tired. Better than other kinds I've lived through." She spoke in a low voice, almost a whisper. And right then, Miguel realized there were things there he couldn't grasp. It became clear to him, too. Anna wasn't the type to open up easily. She had a whole world tucked inside her. He leaned against the wall, crossed his arms, and couldn't help himself. I've already gotten tired of a lot of things, too. Sometimes it feels like I lost everything all at once. Now there's just this. Wake up, work, try not to think. It wasn't supposed to be like this. The way he said that seemed to hang in the air. Anna didn't answer right away. She let his words sink in. And in that silence, their eyes met again. They didn't need anything else. It was like saying, "I know, I get it." She came closer, picked up a broom, and started sweeping a random corner, just to have a reason to stay by his side. She spoke without looking at him directly. "You know, I lost everything once, too. I left where I used to live because if I'd stayed, there'd be nothing left of me. Here, I learned how to breathe again. But there are still days it hurts to remember." Miguel looked at her, noticing how Anna spoke almost without a voice, like someone afraid a silent scream might slip out. Her hand trembled lightly as she held the broom. At that moment, with the last light fading and smoke curling in through a crack in the window, he truly understood the kind of courage it took to start over in a place like this. Courage he'd only pretended to have when he arrived, but was just now beginning to understand for real. The weight of their pasts settled between them, among the toolboxes and wooden benches, like another thing that needed fixing but hadn't come with instructions. Miguel thought about sharing more, talking about the pain, the fear of being found out, the shame he felt every time he looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. But all that came out was, "I don't know how much longer I can keep hiding. Sometimes I want to run. Other times, I just wish I could turn invisible." Anna finally set the broom aside, took a deep breath, and looked at him like someone deciding to trust, just for a moment, just to keep him from being alone in his hurt. "We think we can run away from what hurts," she said quietly, "but sooner or later, it all catches up. At least here, I don't have to pretend to be someone I'm not. Not to anyone, not even myself." They went quiet again, but this time, the silence was different. It was like a net holding them up. Miguel lowered his head, relieved because, for the first time in months, he felt he didn't need to run, at least not right that minute. Maybe he wasn't alone in that desert anymore. Outside, a dog barked in the distance. Cicadas buzzed loud and steady, as if trying to cover up the strange calm. Anna looked out the window, a little lost, and he realized how much could be said with just a look like that. Her fingers played with an old ring hanging from a chain around her neck. Miguel noticed and thought of the stories behind that gesture. He didn't ask anything. He'd learned that, here, timing was different. He respected that. When he closed the shed door, the sound was soft, almost a whisper saying the day was done. They left together, walking slowly, feet pressing into the grass damp with dew. Miguel felt the pressure in his chest ease a little. He looked at Anna, and on their short walk to the gate, he wanted to say something silly, anything, just to keep that moment frozen. But he didn't. The silence between them wasn't only pain or doubt anymore. It was a vague promise, the start of something. As night fell over the village, he realized that sometimes what saves you isn't certainty, but the sincere presence of someone willing to listen. And that's what remained between him and Anna at the end of that day. a silent connection, the kind that doesn't depend on words. And deep inside, very quietly, Miguel started to believe again. The sharp scent of smoke clung to the air before any sound did. At first, it was just a slight annoyance, that weird smell Miguel figured was coming in from the street. But even lying on the hard mattress in his tiny room, his whole body jerked awake, as if someone had hit the emergency button inside him. He got up slowly, the cold wood floor under his feet. He looked out the tiny window, just saw darkness, wet with the middle of the night mist, and the faint moonlight slicing across the schoolyard's trees. Still, the smell was strong, almost sweet, nearly suffocating. Impossible to ignore. The second he opened the door, Miguel felt his body go stiff. Across the hallway, a thick smoke seeped under the principal's office door. The silence was broken by a loud pop, a wire burning through. The corridor was empty, only the echoes of his hurried steps, sandals nearly flying off. His heart was pounding wildly, each beat a warning. Miguel pushed open the office door. Didn't hesitate. The fire was still small, just a quick and terrifying dance atop the fuse box, starting to catch the papers and the old curtain. The heat hit his face, his eyes stung, but he went straight to the desk, grabbed a thick folder and a pile of notebooks he recognized from helping Ana organize things. For a second, memories from the city flashed in his mind. That fancy building, the quiet office, heavyweight legal files. Here, in this cramped room that stank of smoke, none of that mattered. What mattered now were these chalk-smudged notebooks, this jumble of pages scribbled full of children's dreams. Miguel stumbled out, arms loaded with papers and folders, choking on smoke. All his heart knew to do was keep running. He heard a distant scream, Ana, coming down the street barefoot, wrapped in a thin coat. Miguel, what's going on? He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her as he dropped the folders in the corridor and ran back into the office, now even smokier. His eyes burned. His shirt already smelled scorched. He grabbed the water bottle and hurled it at the base of the flames, hoping to buy time before someone brought a bucket. Ana appeared next to him, shaking all over, face terrified, but she didn't hesitate. Together, they threw water, beat the fire with cloths, smothered the embers. It was a silent, desperate battle, only broken by the sound of cloth whipping and coughs racking their frames. When it was over, the room was dark, damp, with a blue haze of smoke hovering. It's done, she croaked, hands blackened with soot. Miguel, shaky, leaned against the wall, shirt clinging to him, overcome by the strangest urge to laugh and cry at the same time. The whole yard was silent now, only the faint patter of rain coming in with the lingering smell of burn. Ana looked at him, and the look was different from any they'd shared before. Eyes worried, shining, her hand shot out without thinking to his shoulder. Are you okay? Did you get hurt? She bit her lip, fingers trembling, breath unsteady, as if the whole night's fright was bottled up right there. Miguel could only nod. No words left, all spent in the middle of the smoke. In that moment, as she gently rolled up her sleeves to wipe a streak of grime from his face, the world vanished. There was no scandal, no past, just now, just her and him. Without warning, Ana let her guard drop. She came closer, closed her eyes for a second, leaned her head on his chest. It was a clumsy hug, awkward, much too quick, but real, warm, unexpected. They were dirty, breathless, lost, but for that split second, everything went quiet. Miguel felt her arms squeeze him sideways, felt her warm skin, the scent of soap and smoke melded. A short moment, but immense. He felt his heart hammering, that good kind of nervous he'd forgotten for years. His arm found its way around her almost by accident, too slowly. Like if he moved too fast, he'd break something. Anna's breath caught. Head pressed against his chest, she felt the heat, the wild heartbeat of someone just as scared, someone aching for safety. She wanted to believe this was a safe place now, that maybe the world might ease up. But she pulled away before she could really think. It was quick, like a jolt. She stepped back, eyes wide, cheeks flushed, and Miguel saw in her the confusion of someone who's lost too much. That Ana who held your gaze too long, but slipped away before she could really show herself. For a moment, the two of them stood there, uncertain. Ana dropped her gaze, fiddling with her fingers, avoiding his eyes. The silence was thick, but not just uncomfortable. Something else was growing there, A connection made of gratitude, fear, a massive urge to trust. Miguel thought about all the things he wanted to say. He wanted to ask if she still felt afraid when night fell, if she really believed she could ever feel at home with someone again. He didn't say a word. He just watched, wishing he could be different, wishing he could earn that hug again. This time without an emergency, without having to be scared. Ana took a deep breath, as if organizing her feelings before they spilt out. "Thank you," she whispered, barely louder than a sigh. She didn't look him in the eyes, but she stayed, right there, like she was waiting for an impossible answer. The corridor still reeked of smoke. They were both dirty, small, in a world that could be cruel and unfair. But now and then, it gave you a minute to stop and embrace in the middle of the night. The rest of the village fell back asleep, not knowing about the fire or imagining that shy embrace between two outsiders tangled in secrets. Even the rain seemed to wait, falling softly, washing away the dust and traces of the night. And there, on the cold floor of a school barely saved, Ana and Miguel took, without even realizing, their first step towards something new. It wasn't trust just yet, but it was the desire to try being with someone again, if only for one more night. The smell of fresh coffee filled the small diner, mingling with the bittersweet scent of baking bread, butter, and whispered conversation. It was early, but Dona Jerima's cafe seemed even more packed than usual. Every table full, chairs pushed in crookedly, people pressed close together, but nobody focused on their own plate. Everyone was talking about one thing: the fire, the school, last night's panic, the shouting, the rush, the thick smoke billowing from the windows. But most of all about him, the outsider, Miguel. With every sentence, there was a sideways glance, a spoon paused midair, voices dropping to murmurs. "You think he started the fire himself?" someone prodded. "He's way too eager to help for no reason," someone else replied. Miguel entered and felt it all without looking at anyone. His stomach already churning, he almost turned back. It was like carrying a shirt that said "guilty" across his chest in giant letters. Only, it wasn't fear of what they might do to him. It was the weight of a place that, until just days before, had seemed so simple. Now, each step echoed louder than any siren. He stood at the door, debating whether to fake normalcy or disappear before things got even messier. The smell of coffee, which usually felt like home, soured. All he wanted was a little silence, but this kind of silence was a punishment. He remembered his father saying that in a small town, everyone thinks they know everything. He'd never understood until now. Ana was already seated. She was trying to drink her coffee, stirring in sugar slowly, but nothing tasted like anything. Her fists were clenched under the table, nails digging into her palms. Every phrase cut across the room like a knife, and she recognized the tone. Fear disguised as justice, hurt turned into suspicion. She looked at Miguel. He pretended to look for a chair, but she saw the tension in his shoulders, the way he swallowed hard, absently stroking the strap of his backpack. His hands were trembling a bit, something most people wouldn't notice. Except her. Their eyes met, briefly. Ana looked away but couldn't keep it up for long. She felt him there, heavy between her and everyone else. And she thought, yes, he's a stranger. He's even afraid of his own words. But, for some reason, the night before he was the one who stayed, when everyone else ran. The table beside grew rowdier, a group of men exaggerating stories about what happened. One of them said, loud enough for the whole room, that one only shows up when there's trouble. It's like he brought bad luck with him. Another, an older man, grumbled, city folk are all the same, tricking fools. They laughed. Miguel didn't react. He pretended to study the wall covered in old photographs, the warped frame of Dona Jerima's family, as if that might shield him somehow. Inside, he wondered when he'd stop running. If he'd ever just exist, without needing to hide. He wanted to explode, to yell he wasn't a criminal, but the fear of proving them right held the words in his mouth. Ana stood up slowly, fixed her hair, tucked a strand behind her ear. Her heart was pounding in her throat. She didn't like speaking up or making trouble, but today something pushed even harder. You weren't there, were you? Her voice was clear, not loud but firm. The whole cafe stilled. It was Miguel who went into the room to save the papers, when nobody else knew what to do. She stammered a little, but kept going. If he hadn't helped, the school would have burned down. Maybe we wouldn't even have a place to leave our kids today. The silence changed. No one quite knew whether to laugh, scold, or just pretend nothing had happened. The air felt thick, like everyone was holding their breath for another fight. Miguel felt her words cutting through the quiet, reaching him. It wasn't much, but for that instant, it was everything. At the same time, part of him wanted to run even more. He was afraid of letting anyone get close, afraid of becoming a target again, afraid of Ana too. Ana met every face. She felt angry, not just for him, but because she knew how easy it was to destroy someone just for the satisfaction of being right. She remembered herself, how no one had believed her, the sideways looks, fake friends, silent judgment. That's why she spoke up for Miguel, but also for herself. For a chance to be better, to not be complicit in so much quiet injustice. Miguel thanked her with a shy nod. His eyes were lost, but grateful. He sat near the counter, as far from the door as he could. He looked over at Ana from time to time, their silent communication. Almost an apology, almost a whispered thanks. Not sure if any of this was a beginning or just the next chance to get hurt again. Through the window, the sky was still gray and misty. Outside, trees swayed slowly, lulled by the soft wind, as if the world was waiting. It's strange, but behind every simple thing, the scrape of bread, a quick smile, Anna's hand resting on a child's shoulder, were 1,000 words that no one dared say aloud. The gossip went on, but differently. Some whispered, but glanced at Ana. Others shook their heads, lost in their own memories. Gradually, the atmosphere started shifting. Not trust, but the start of it. The sort of bond built more from silence than from praise. Deep down, Ana felt that from this moment forward, she'd chosen a side. She didn't know if it was right, but she was tired of betting on fear. In that small cafe, thick with half-told stories and strong coffee, Miguel was no longer alone. No promises, no guarantees, just one tiny step, almost invisible, towards something that, maybe, could become love. Some things in life only happen when no one's watching, or at least, when it seems no one will. It was a typical Saturday at the market. Low sky, heavy clouds holding back promised rain, the smell of roasting corn mixed with the scent of fresh jabuticabas. Miguel left early, head spinning from the tense breakfast chatter. He wanted silence, but the market made a different kind of noise, not the city's drone, but the gentle clamor of life moving slowly, kids darting between stalls, ladies sizing up pumpkins, men talking football and weather all in the same breath. Funny how, just when he tried to keep out of sight, Ana was right across the street, arranging bags beside a candy stand. It wasn't like before, when they bumped into each other because of school business. This time, it almost felt like fate, standing in the right spot when you're expecting absolutely nothing. Miguel nearly turned away, still burning over everything said about him. But Ana, as always, noticed first. She pretended not to see his embarrassment as he fiddled with his collar, but she smiled in that same gentle way. Not a big, broad smile, no. Just one corner of her mouth curled up, but on a gray Saturday like this, it was more than any blue sky. Didn't expect you at such a public event, she teased, unwrapping a piece of fudge that immediately stuck to her fingers. He fumbled a reply, glancing at her, at his hands, at the ground. I have to learn to buy bread. I actually stood in line today. I'll count that as a win. Ana laughed, a quiet laugh, the kind only someone standing close can hear. A laugh that felt almost like a secret. A comfortable silence settled between them. No weight to it. Not the silence of someone hurt. It was like words could wait because the time between them was good. They wandered side by side, lazily crossing the market. Now and then, he'd bump her basket, or she would stop suddenly, and he'd have to stop too. In those moments, they exchanged quick glances. Almost like kids, almost conspiratorial. She brushed her fingers over his arm as she pointed out colorful cookies at Mrs. Tsida's stall. Have you ever had these? She asked, a playful challenge glinting in her eyes. He admitted he hadn't. Didn't even know what they were called. Raised on big city food, he'd never tasted anything in this little world of sugar treats. She bought 2 and handed one to him. Miguel bit down and nearly broke a tooth. Hard, but good. He looked at her, trying to figure out if he was supposed to laugh or ask for help. If you laugh, it means you're one of us now, Ana said, watching to see if he really would. He did, a little awkwardly, but let go of the weight he'd been carrying since the start of the week. She brushed a crumb from his chin with her fingers, so softly that a small, almost unnoticeable shiver went up his neck. Anna told him stories of schoolchildren, of kids who asked the strangest questions about life. She told him about a girl who swore peaches grew in cans because her mother only bought them preserved. Miguel laughed, and she didn't notice that he watched her mouth more than the story. He wasn't sure exactly when she'd become part of what he felt as home. "And you?" she asked, a bit distracted, swirling a stick on the ground. "What did you used to do for fun before you were?" She paused, searching for a gentler word. "Before you became a stranger here?" The question caught him off guard. No one here had asked him anything so lighthearted for ages. Miguel thought for a moment, grabbed an apple from a stall, wiped it on his shirt, took a bite. "I like playing guitar." "Well, I did, it's been years. I probably forgot how. Used to have a band with my neighbors back in my teens. Can you picture that?" She couldn't help laughing, covered her mouth as if it was forbidden. He realized it had been ages since he'd seen her laugh so freely, without calculating, without fear. He said he liked to cook, but only for himself. No one to complain, no one to praise. She got curious, dared him to bake something at the school one day, if he wasn't too afraid of embarrassment. The way she said it was light, but with a layer of care underneath. Little by little, she was dismantling his armor. The sun appeared out of nowhere, slipping through a break in the clouds. In the beam of light, her fair skin seemed golden. Miguel was silent, just watching. It wasn't wild longing. It was the sweet nostalgia of someone who realizes they can want again. They stopped walking almost at the same moment, in front of a flower stall. With no one else around, a steady jostle of passers-by made Anna stumble a bit. Just enough so her hand brushed his. A quick touch. Almost nothing. But in that instant, Miguel felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. It lasted barely 2 seconds. But the touch lingered. They stood frozen in place. The world spun slowly around them. A child crying down the way, a vendor arguing over change, a woman hollering not to step on her rug. But they said nothing, hands hovering close, too shy to move them apart, too afraid to do more. He wondered if she felt it too. If she'd also been struck in that place where everything crumbles and everything makes sense all at once. He worried he'd break the spell, that she'd pull away, that he'd lose the little he had. Anna was holding herself back too. Her gaze fixed on a red flower that barely existed, but it was clear she wanted to say something, and just couldn't find the words. The silence, in that moment, could have meant anything. The kind of pause you make when you don't want to break the magic. Wanting to say too much, afraid to hear something unexpected. A raindrop splashed cold on his arm. He smiled, knowing that there was little certainty in that instant, but that this memory of almost held hands and the scent of fresh fruit at the market would last. Anna bought the flowers without asking the price, maybe only to break the spell. He held her bag while she paid. On the way back, she just said softly, "Thank you, Miguel." He wanted to answer. Something, anything, but didn't have words small enough. So they walked along together, each holding one handle of the bag. The time it took to get to the school gate passed slowly, almost stopping, as if Saturday didn't want to end. As if love, there, was finally simple. Or at least, possible. The sound of an unfamiliar engine came first. Not the pickup trucks of farm folk, not the old tractors stained with mud. This was a heavy noise, something else. A black car, far too clean for the village's dirt roads, crossed the square in front of the school. Its tires spat up clods of earth. The windows were closed, but you could feel someone watching from inside. There was something intrusive about the way the car occupied that space. Miguel was painting a bench in the yard. The brush stopped mid-stroke, green paint dripping onto the back of his hand. He first saw it by its shadow, then looked up and saw the whole thing. His entire body went rigid, as if someone had pulled a wire straight through him. For a second, he seemed to freeze in front of the children. Only his chest kept rising and falling fast, like the air had turned to smoke. Anna, inside, felt the strange tension in the air. Through the windows, she could still catch a glimpse of the car circling behind the church. She noticed Miguel's back, completely frozen. She made a quick gesture to the fifth graders. "Come on, everyone. Inside. Now, quickly." Even she didn't understand where the urgency in her voice came from. She just knew she had to get everyone out of there. The hallway filled with small footsteps. The children didn't ask questions. They could feel in the wind that something wasn't right. Outside, Miguel kept watching the car turn the corner, its black color disappearing in the dust. His hand was shaking. He wiped his sweaty forehead with dirty fingers, trying to hide it before anyone saw. The paintbrush fell to the ground and was forgotten. He wanted to run, to hide in the brush, but his body was heavy, glued to the middle of the empty yard. He felt a fear he couldn't explain to anyone, and yet it was much too big to fit inside him alone. Anna crossed the door slowly. She didn't want to draw attention, but she also refused to pretend nothing had happened. She stopped beside him, without touching, letting silence create that odd space between them. The chilly mountain wind fluttered a forgotten scarf on the porch. The two of them stood there, staring at the road where the car had vanished. He wondered if she'd understood everything. She wondered if she should ask something, but the courage didn't come, nor did the right words. The silence was so heavy it hurt. It wasn't that comforting quiet from a while ago, sitting by the fireplace on a cold night. This was different. Every second seemed to beg the question of whether he was lying, whether she truly trusted him. It was a silence thick with secrets and fear, neither wanting to be the first to speak. There was a shadow on Miguel's face, but he wouldn't let his voice out. She saw his lips tremble. For a moment, his eyes closed, as if praying this wasn't the start of a bigger nightmare. Anna felt the urge to ask if he was okay. But, okay, was so far from what was happening. The question died before it even left her throat. Instead, she focused on his paint-stained hand, clenched in a desperate fist. The wind grew stronger. A dark cloud climbed the horizon, and the smell of rain spread softly, as if asking for permission. The kids watched through the window, sensing in the adults that this wasn't a time to play. They seemed even smaller, huddled together, as if Miguel's sadness had grown and seeped into every corner of the classrooms. Miguel didn't know where to look. Each time he met Anna's eyes, it felt as if she could see straight through him. There was an old fear in her eyes, too, not of the same things, but of what might happen if the outside world invaded this tiny refuge. He realized she was waiting for a sign, a word of trust, maybe a truth he didn't want to give. The tip of Anna's shoe scratched the hard floor, just a faint sound in a silent world. She looked at him, brown eyes still gentle but torn. He looked away, pretending to rearrange the half-painted bench, facing her head-on hurt too much. He felt an overwhelming urge to tell her everything, to say who he really was, but the old fear of being rejected swallowed it up before it could reach the surface. Anna's phone buzzed, a message from the principal warning about the incoming storm. She read it quickly but didn't show any sign of leaving. She stayed put, grounded, as if holding back a secret bigger than herself. The distance between them felt like a needle. Miguel wanted to thank her for not asking, but also hated himself for pulling her into his own fear. The rain began gently, water drumming on the rooftops, the scent of wet earth rising. The black car must have disappeared long ago, or maybe was just waiting around the next bend, he thought. His heart pounded like an alarm he couldn't switch off. He almost spoke, but shame swallowed his words. The silence between them was as loud as the coming storm. Two worlds, trying to hide from one another, but no longer able. Anna rubbed her arms, hairs standing on end, maybe from the cold, maybe from the fright. Finally, Miguel whispered, "Sorry." But he didn't say what for. She nodded, such a tiny gesture it was almost invisible. That was everything, and it was nothing. To stay, not to ask, to accept, just for today. They remained there, side by side, each lost inside their own secret, watching the first heavy raindrops fall on the cracked ground. The drama hadn't exploded yet, but, that day, it hung in the air, like the thunderstorm above them, waiting for the right moment to break. That night felt longer than all the others. The sky was clear, but the cold wandered through the village like a stray dog. In the silence, you could hear even Miguel's footsteps as he climbed the little hill to the school, slow, boots dragging mud. It was as if he was searching for words in the ground itself, stumbling over them. The lights in the school were still on, proof that Anna hadn't left. He stood outside, gazing at her shadow in the window. Anna sat in the last desk, arms crossed, propping up her tired head. Even from a distance, something showed in her eyes, part sadness, part stubbornness. As if she was wrestling with a feeling, a thought she didn't want to let go. Miguel mustered his courage, took a deep breath. The air smelled like old chalk, mixed with the bitterness of wet earth. He knocked softly on the door and waited. She hesitated, only opening after the second knock. She looked at him as if to guess what was coming this time. A favor, a confession, maybe a goodbye. But Ana just left the door open without a word, returning to her desk and watching Miguel from across the room, like someone holding a secret between their teeth. He stepped in, shy, closing the door behind him. The cold stayed outside, but something colder, a tension, entered with them. Neither of them knew the rules for this encounter. Ana. Miguel said her name almost in a whisper, carrying a weight that wouldn't lighten. She pretended to look for something in her bag, just to avoid his gaze. Today, thank you, he went on, and though he kept his voice low, it was as if those words had been torn from a far-off place. For what you did, getting the kids out, not asking anything. Silence tightened around the two. He noticed her hands trembling slightly as she gathered up the books, a small movement invisible to anyone else. Everything they weren't saying was tangible. Ana wanted to trust, but she was scared. Miguel wanted to tell her everything, but didn't know where to begin. In the end, it seemed their real conversation happened in glances. Sometimes Ana would risk a look at him, just for a second. A long look, loaded with all the questions she was terrified to ask. He always flinched away, just a little, but stayed, like someone saying goodbye and returning at the last moment. The school creaked with wind rattling the windows. The walls smelled of nostalgia, old books, forgotten toys, leftover snacks. Inside those walls, every emotion echoed painfully loud. Miguel moved closer, stopping on the other side of her desk. His heart pounded like a stone inside his chest. He couldn't remember ever being so afraid of someone before, not afraid of her, but of what she could do to him, to that feeling hidden deep in his pockets. I know. You know I'm not everything I seem, Ana. She gave a half-smile. 3 seconds of courage before slipping her armor back over her eyes. I suspect as much, she whispered. But, honestly, I'd rather not know. He stared at her, searching for a crack. He wanted to touch her hand, just to feel that this was real. But he didn't dare. The gesture died midway. Then, half by accident, she dropped the pencil. Miguel crouched down, too. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same object. The touch was brief, but charged with a kind of electricity neither tried to deny. Their eyes met on the old tile floor, in that small world of dust and unsaid stories. Time hung suspended. Too many memories flashed through his mind. The courthouse, the cameras, the shouting on the streets. Everything he'd lost. He looked at Ana like someone seeing, for the first time, a person who just might save him. He wanted to say, "You saved my life just by existing." But all he managed was, "Sometimes I feel that here, only here, I'm not a mistake." Ana took a shaky breath, holding back tears. She lowered her head, bangs falling over her face. I can't be responsible for anyone, Miguel. I can barely handle myself," she whispered, fighting memories only she could see. He didn't want to hear it, but he understood. The kind of understanding you feel, not judge. Still, he stepped in closer, doubling down on his fear of being rejected, of living forever with the question. "I just needed," his voice failed, and, without thinking, he took her hand, holding it firmly, coaxing her to stand. He looked into her eyes, searching for a place free from sadness or suspicion, looking for hope. And right then, between one breath and the next, Miguel felt it. It wasn't a choice anymore. It was a need. He leaned in, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. She didn't, but she trembled. The kiss was awkward, hesitant, slow, full of tenderness, but also a painful insecurity. A kiss from people who had spent too long being afraid of life, allowing themselves only a fragile second of peace. For an instant, she surrendered. Then she pulled away, as if she'd touched a flame. Anna's eyes were wide, her cold hands pushing him back, her body saying enough before her mouth could. "No, no, no," she murmured, voice shaking, eyes full of pain. But in that no, there was no anger, no contempt, just icy panic, a childlike fear of being hurt again. She stumbled between the desks, hands groping the walls like someone lost in the dark. Miguel stayed where he was, a pit opening in his stomach. He wanted to chase her, beg forgiveness for existing, for feeling. But he didn't move. He had no strength left. He listened to her footsteps echo down the hallway and out of sight. The echo of that no took a long time to die. At the end of the night, All that was left was silence. An empty bench, the scent of chalk, a broken heart, and a fear even greater for whatever was still to come. The worst part is, nobody ever prepares you for when the truth bursts out like that, unannounced and merciless. In this village, usually time drags along, but that stifling evening, everything seemed to crash down in a matter of minutes. All it took was the old TV set in the bakery, the only place with decent reception, blaring out the news while everyone gathered for coffee after work. Miguel showed up early that day, with the hollow eyes of someone who never sleeps right and a drawn look, listless, pretending to keep up a routine. What he really wanted was to see Ana. It still hurt to remember how she'd pulled away the night before, looking at him like a bad memory come to life. He didn't know what to do, but he kept showing up, maybe hoping that a simple explanation could fix everything. The bakery was crowded. It smelled of fresh bread and anticipation. Dona Laura, who always whispered behind the counter, stopped serving when the urgent news alert flashed on the TV. Nobody moved. Joao's family, the giggling kids, even Mr. Manuel, the retired cab driver, everyone sat frozen. The news anchor appeared. The story was harsh. New scandal. Lawyer Miguel Vasconcellos wanted by the police. The photo was unmistakable. Even with his unshaven face and clothes worn thin from hard days, everyone knew. Silence dropped like a weight. All those eyes that just yesterday saw him as just another person now turned sharp. Seated by the window, Miguel felt the air sucked from his chest. The clatter of cutlery stopped. All that remained was the drone of the TV replaying his name. Images of São Paulo, luxury buildings, cars, flashbulbs. And there, in that dusty village, Miguel became the criminal from the news. No one spoke for a while, but they didn't have to. Dona Laura slowly edged away, leaving coffee on the tray. Joao scowled and looked away, as if afraid to meet Miguel's gaze. The guys from the work crew didn't come over. The smell of bread was just a pretext for a quick exit. One or two who used to greet him lowered their eyes and left. The weight of things unsaid was crueler than any outright attack. Miguel sat there, numb, trying to understand. He thought about explaining himself, but the words wouldn't come. He remembered his last talk with Ana, the fear in her voice. Did she know yet? Did she believe him? For the first time since arriving, Miguel felt real shame, not the kind born of his own mistakes, but of others' accusations. It wasn't long before the phone rang at the school. Someone wanted to speak with Ana. The rumor spread, dragging suspicion and gossip with it. She arrived at the bakery soon after, her step hesitant, almost faltering. She surveyed the room and understood everything without asking. Searched out Miguel's face. In his corner, he looked smaller than ever, a man lost, waiting for a verdict no judge would give. Anna's expression was hard to decipher, hurt mixed with worry, fear with anger. She didn't go to him right away. She kept her place, as if the brick floor were too hot to bear. Her hands trembled, but she kept control. There was a knot in her throat and tangled thoughts, betrayal, deceit. But also memories of how gently he listened to the children, the confessions he'd whispered beside the school, the days when he seemed just as lonely as she'd once been in São Paulo. Like it or not, here they were again, face to face, surrounded by people who only knew how to judge. The murmurs started out timid, then filled the air. An old lady muttered about the danger of outsiders. A young guy said he'd always known there was something off about that stranger. Miguel wished he could disappear. Everything he'd tried to build had turned to dust in seconds. He kept his head down, waited for Ana to make a move. The silence between them was no longer comfortable. It was cold, like a world without light at dawn. Miguel wanted to shout, to defend himself, but the words stuck in his throat. All he could think about was how quickly things had changed. Yesterday a kiss, an almost "I love you," and today the certainty of being abandoned. Ana approached slowly. Her eyes were full of tears that refused to fall. She stopped 2 steps from him. She wanted to ask, wanted to curse, but all of it vanished. She took a deep breath. She couldn't trust, not really, but she remembered what it was like to be called a liar, to feel the weight of doubt with no one to listen. She looked at Miguel, saw the fear, the shame, and something else, a weary truth, just hoping for a chance to be heard. People waited, expecting a scene, wanting her to expel this man. But Ana just asked quietly so no one else would hear. "Is it true, Miguel?" Her voice broke at the end. It took him a moment. He looked at her, then at his own mud-stained shoes. All he found inside himself was sadness. "No, I'm not what they say, Anna. I swear," he said, almost breathless. Did she believe him? She didn't know. But for a moment, the world shrank, down to just the two of them. The baker broke the tension, grumbling that he didn't want trouble in his shop. Miguel gathered his few belongings and left slowly, feeling the weight of all eyes on his back. Outside, the sky threatened more rain. The wind carried a veil of dust, the smell of earth coming ahead of the first drops. The village was no longer a refuge. Now it was just exile, where all dreams had shattered. Anna stood still in the bakery's hallway. She didn't go after Miguel. She didn't leave either. She just stood there, realizing that the worst part of being left behind is discovering there's still something left inside you. Trust, anger, compassion, all together, all hurting at once. While Miguel wandered the muddy street alone, he didn't even notice how cruel the quiet could be here. It wasn't just the absence of noise, it was the judgment, the fear. That night, the village seemed to close in around him, as if every door, every window, every heart had decided, you don't belong here anymore. And in the end, anyone who has felt the pain of being betrayed by those you least expect can see the suffering in another's eyes. Anna felt her chest ache, the urge to run after him, ask for an explanation, to beg for all of this to be a lie. But she stood still, because sometimes the terror of doubt is even worse than loneliness. And there, under that heavy sky, love, fear, and shame were all that remained. It was a heavy night, one of those that seemed to last for days. The sliver of moon barely made it through the window of the little house Miguel rented. Inside, he folded shirts with slow, mechanical motions. He wasn't just trying to organize his clothes. He was trying to put his head, his feelings, in order, all of them strewn across the bed like the open suitcase. Silence. Now and then, a cricket outside or the neighbor's dog nosing through dry leaves. Miguel wondered what he would say if someone showed up. But there was no one. Everyone knew. The whole village knew. Now that was who he was. The man on TV, the criminal. 15 seconds of news, and no one would meet his eyes ever again. The world could collapse over a mistake like that. At school, Anna's classroom was empty. The smell of chalk wasn't as strong anymore. Notebooks were still piled on one table, crumpled pencil drawings, children's names half erased. Kids whispered in the hallways. They missed her, sure, but couldn't explain the new emptiness. Maybe they only recognized absence by its echo. No one laughed during recess. No one called for her. No one asked about Uncle Miguel, who, until yesterday, was busy screwing new shelves into the library wall. Anna felt empty inside, too, a hollow that no task or conversation could fill. She could barely breathe, but she stayed strong. On impulse, she went to the shelf and picked up a note a student had left. "Teacher, you always make us brave." Anna read the childish handwriting over and over, feeling a strange warmth in her chest, a mix of pride and nostalgia for something that wasn't even finished yet. She wanted to believe Miguel, but what if he'd been fooling everyone the whole time? Would she, once again, be the one deceived? She stared out the window, watching the fog wrap the schoolyard. Closed her eyes, trying to recall the smell of breakfast he sometimes clumsily made for her. Remembered how he'd get nervous, asking where she kept the sugar. Remembered the day the two of them sat on the curb, wordless, sharing stale cake and laughing at their own messes. It felt like another life. Miguel packed the last shirt. His hands trembled. He didn't cry. He couldn't tell if it was pride or exhaustion. Inside, some part of him begged. Stay, ask for help, try to tell the truth. But the urge to run was stronger. He'd learned early. Men don't complain, don't ask, don't expose themselves. They just go. They just quietly give up. But before leaving, he took one last walk through the house. Touched the doorframe, the handprints he hadn't noticed before. In the tiny kitchen, he stumbled over the chair where she used to sit. He almost called Anna, almost sent a message. But he did nothing. He just stood there, suitcase ready, chest heavy with regret. In the village, people whispered. The bakery had been empty since morning. The baker, usually so cheerful, avoided even looking outside. Joanna, the neighbor, walked past Miguel's place more slowly, spying, but never daring to stop. The cold came early that fall, bringing in a wind that slipped through the doorframes. It was as if the whole village wanted to forget the warmth from a few days before, when Miguel was just a friendly stranger, not a headline. Ana walked past too, her hands cold and clammy at the same time. She wandered aimlessly for a bit, until she leaned against a telephone pole and let herself cry, softly. It wasn't just fear. It was anger for having trusted, anger at herself, grief for the emptiness that bloomed when she realized he really was leaving. She wanted to run to him, ask for answers, hear his side. But she had no words, no courage. She wanted to scream so everyone could hear. It wasn't fair, no one knew enough to judge. But what if, deep down, he really was guilty? What if she only wanted to believe him out of loneliness? Coward, she thought, torn between going home and facing her feelings. Deep down, she knew Miguel was alone, too. She pictured him inside, packing, closing up windows in the half-light. She imagined the sound of a zipper, carelessly folded clothes, a whole life stuffed into a borrowed suitcase. Was he looking for her through the window, too? Was he trembling with fear, just like she was? At school, the kids asked to draw hearts with colored pencils. Some drew two stick figures holding hands. Some asked if the teacher would leave like the man did. Others just stayed quiet, dragging their pencils across the table, not knowing why. So much was happening beneath the adults' noses, and only the silence grew heavier. The sky darkened in the late afternoon. The smell of rain rose from the pasture, seeped into houses, kitchens, everywhere. Miguel glanced at the calendar on the wall, did the math. A month, that was all, and yet everything had changed. From respected lawyer to forgotten stranger. He thought of his mother, his brother, the friends back in Sao Paulo who sent worried messages, not knowing where he'd gone. Here, no one wanted anything more to do with him. He grabbed the suitcase, stood by the door for a while. Far off, he could hear Anna's voice calling the kids inside the school, a memory both sweet and cruel. His heart was as heavy as stone. He almost put the suitcase down, almost went to say sorry, almost begged her not to give up on him. But he just took a deep breath and stood there, listening to the wind and his memories. In the village, everyone seemed smaller. The adults whispered, the children went home early, the smell of soup drifted from closed windows. It was winter before its time. Too much loneliness for one house to hold. And no one really knew which one was more lost, the stranger about to leave, or the teacher who, suddenly, felt everything she'd never dared say. The next morning, the whole village felt chillier than ever. It wasn't just the southern wind biting through. It was an atmosphere of uncertainty, a silence full of whispers, small rumors drifting from corner to corner, never quite meeting Miguel's eyes. I remember how Ana walked into the bakery, not even buying bread. She just stood there for a moment, as if she needed to breathe in the scent of strong, old coffee to find enough courage. The woman behind the counter didn't even say hello, just gave her that look that said, "What now?" And Ana, nearly trembling, took a deep breath, clenched her fists, and went right back to the street. The sound of her steps on the sidewalk was soft, but suddenly it seemed like everyone could hear it. Some followed, too curious to resist. Others peeked from their windows. In minutes, that little town square, where only the wind and the leafless trees ever made a sound, filled up. People gathered, arms crossed, faces tense or angered. And the bandstand stood there, white and quiet, as if waiting, knowing some secret would be revealed that morning. Miguel had his bags packed, but Ana went straight to the simple house he'd been renting and knocked boldly, not caring what he was thinking. Just her, knuckles rapping smartly on the wood, face flushed, jaw set. He answered, too surprised to hide the sadness in his eyes. They hadn't spoken since the scandal. Only silence, only pain. She looked deep, straight at him, and just said, "Come with me." That was it. He didn't speak, didn't ask, just grabbed his jacket and followed her. The walk to the square wasn't long, but it was heavy. Every step was a temptation to stop, to disappear, to pretend he'd never been through here. But Ana never slowed down. Her heart pounded harder than ever, with nerves, with fear, but also with hope, a shy hope threatening to slip away. When they reached the square, everyone turned to look. The stares were a mixture of anger, suspicion, pity. It was as if each person was waiting for an apology, or maybe just one more scandal. No one cracked a joke, no one smiled. The silence was so heavy you could almost feel it thick in the air, pressing between bodies, a silence that chilled to the bone. Anna climbed the bandstand steps without ceremony. She wasn't one to draw attention, but she stopped at the top and looked out at the people who'd been part of her life since she'd run away from her past. Not shouting, but with a voice so clear it seemed to cut right through the cold, she began. You all know my story. You know I ended up here because I was scared, ashamed. I ran away from someone. I ran away from myself. As she spoke, she twisted a ring on her finger, an old nervous habit. Her hand trembled just a little. Still, she kept going. No one here ever asked me why. No one judged me for the secrets I carried. You opened your arms to me, even when I was just a stranger, covered in scars. Her voice faltered for a second, and her gaze dropped. The silence grew even heavier, weighing down every shoulder in the square. Now there's someone among us being judged before he's even had the chance to tell his side. Some people crossed their arms tighter. Others dropped their eyes, embarrassed. Anna took a deep breath, dug up some courage from deep inside, and looked down at Miguel, standing alone under the bandstand, suddenly seeming small, like his suitcases weighed far more than he could carry. I just asked for one thing, Anna said, almost a whisper, almost a prayer. Listen to him. Listen to Miguel's truth before deciding whether or not he deserves a place here. In that moment, everyone changed a little. Some seemed angry, others just confused. The school children fell silent, holding each other's hands, picking up on the adult tension, the kind that's felt inside the chest, even when you understand none of the words. Miguel climbed the steps to the bandstand. His steps were slow, hesitant. He wasn't the same confident man who had once run big meetings in the glass towers of Sao Paulo. He was just a broken man now, his whole world collapsing behind his eyes. He breathed in, closed his eyes for a moment. Inside, wrestling with the fear of not being heard, of being just another guilty man in a crowd. He opened his eyes, rested both hands on the wood of the railing, and began, in a tone not even he recognized. I ran away because they were lying about me. I didn't know who to trust anymore. I lost everything overnight. My name, my job, even the trust of those I loved most. Miguel's voice cracked. There, in front of that unlikely audience, he had no legal armor, no fancy suit, no jargon, just a dry throat, just the raw truth. They lied. Set me up. I came here because there was nowhere else to go. I just wanted a place where nobody knew me. I just wanted to breathe. He looked at Anna. She made a tiny gesture, hugging her own arms, as if sending him strength without a word. I know it seems strange that I haven't told you everything, but here, I found people who treated me better than any important people I ever met out there. Miguel looked at all of them, one by one, his eyes filled with tears, though he didn't actually cry. He held it in, as if he had to stay strong just a little longer. I'm not a criminal. I never was. I just wanted enough time to prove it, and to believe that starting over was still worth it. For an instant, it seemed nobody breathed. The wind stilled, the church bell didn't ring. Just silence. Slowly, someone nodded. One of the mother's eyes glistened. Old Vicente, who always had a scowl, let out a loud sigh. The children began to whisper, asking each other if Miguel was leaving, but now without fear, only curiosity. Anna stayed where she was, standing at his side, her eyes full of pride and a touch of sorrow. She knew there were no promises of a happy ending there. Only, perhaps, the beginning of a second chance. In that small moment, in that forgotten village square, a sliver of hope appeared. Fragile but real. And Miguel, for the first time in a long while, felt maybe it was possible to trust again. I remember that winter as if it were now. The air had a dampness that stuck to your skin, and the sun rarely showed. Just a thin mist hugging the treetops, giving everything a faded look. People said when the weather closed in like that, the village held its breath. Even the birds were quieter. In the middle of that strange silence, Anna and Miguel met again, but without anywhere to hide. There was no way to pretend anymore, no more acting like strangers. After laying it all bare in the square, there was little left between them except what they shared, an unspoken promise that they'd try together. It was odd realizing that. Strange, beautiful, and a little frightening. The school's cafe the next morning was empty, filled only with the scent of stale bread and tea. Anna slipped in sideways, eyes on her own feet. Her hair loose, messy. She chewed her lips, thoughtful, as if rehearsing what she wanted to say. Miguel was shuffling through a pile of old papers, his fingers stained with ink from the ancient printer. He looked up when he heard the door creak, but said nothing. His eyes had that look of someone who's thankful and apologetic all at once. They barely needed words. They just stood there, facing each other, almost silent for a long moment. I think in that instant she understood everything he wanted to say, and he knew he didn't need to beg for trust. It was time to act, together. "We're going to prove your innocence," she said quietly, but without hesitation. "I'll help you, Miguel. I'm not afraid." He just nodded, almost smiling, but tension pulling at the corner of his mouth. His "thank you" came more from his eyes than his voice. Their gestures were subtle but intense. When she handed him a hot mug, her hands trembled a little, just enough to see. When he adjusted her chair, his hand touched the backrest lightly, but his fist clenched under the table. It was as if, slowly, they were learning to be brave together. The days that followed were a silent marathon, all trial, error, and stifled anxiety. Ana, who'd never handled court paperwork, felt tangled up, sometimes lost, but Miguel was patient for the first time since he arrived. He explained things slowly, sliding the pen across the page, his finger guiding each line. Sometimes, she caught him gazing off into nothing after speaking, as if afraid of hoping too much from people or from fate. He moved like someone who'd wandered chilly courthouse corridors, who'd seen empty promises pile up. But there, he tried to trust Ana, to believe in a kind of honesty so rare it almost hurt. The nights seemed longer. The wood stove crackled softly. They'd sit side by side, piecing together crumpled spreadsheets, sending hesitant messages to Miguel's old colleagues, a handful willing to help, some afraid, others silent for their own sake. It was hard not to lose heart, but Ana had a way of brushing his arm, touching his hand, squeezing for just a moment, like a reminder that he wasn't alone. She was scared too. Sometimes Ana woke in the night startled by footsteps outside, cars passing at hours when the street was always empty. She'd peek from the curtain, trying not to look frightened, her pulse racing. When she shared that fear with Miguel, it was rarely in words. She'd just place her mug closer to his or quietly move to sit by his side. He noticed, and inside, he was grateful, because he was scared too, not just of others, but of letting her down, of losing this chance. One night, searching for documents in the garage of Miguel's temporary home, he found a box of old agendas. The paper yellowed, smelling of mildew. She stood beside him, reading off names, looking for some clue, some forgotten contact. That's when Ana suggested calling Dona Ruth, Miguel's old office secretary from the city, famous for never losing a single scrap of paper. He hesitated, but Anna's encouragement shone in her eyes. He dialed slowly, palms damp with sweat. When Dona Ruth answered, her voice was a warm embrace from afar. Miguel stammered, nervous, but with Ana nearby pulling gently at his sleeve for reassurance. That call led to copies of important emails. Small victories. Then came the anonymous threats. Notes slipped under the door, calls from block numbers late at night. Let it go. No one will believe you. It chilled the room. Miguel noticed Ana reading one of the notes, waiting to see how she'd react. She read it, folding slowly, fear in her eyes. For a moment, she looked ready to retreat, but she took a deep breath, closed the note firmly, and tossed it into the wood stove. Then she stepped closer to him. A small gesture, but to him, it meant the world. She was with him, no matter how scared. With every threat, their resolve grew. They started walking side by side around the village later into the night, despite the sideways looks. When someone looked away, Ana gripped Miguel's hand tighter. When cold wind cut through after dark, Miguel fixed her coat slowly, just to give her a little warmth, a little care. They didn't hide anymore, didn't whisper. Every small gesture, a lingering glance, a distracted touch on the paperwork, the easy, exhausted silence afterward, spoke louder than any speech. The fear wasn't gone, but it got smaller when shared. Even the village's awkward silence now seemed to rock them in the same breath, as if the world only existed wherever they were, holding hands, facing it all. The morning felt lighter, the kind of pale light that doesn't burn or blind. It simply enters, silently, through the gaps in the schoolroom, and settles there, in Anna's hair, in the little smiles of the children in the yard. The bell had already rung, and the sounds of their voices drifted away amid the flowering trees. Miguel stood beside her, nearly speechless, just soaking in this strange new warmth. He wondered if a heart could really learn a different rhythm, or if all happiness hides its own kind of fear. He couldn't even remember the last time he hadn't needed to watch every step. Maybe this is what peace is, a welcome silence behind the voices, the sweet smell of coffee burning in the principal's room, Anna's hands squeezing his gently, just to let him know it's all right. It's not a dream flickering past. Now and then, he watched her face, tried to memorize her fair skin, the way she'd wrinkle her nose when she tried to stifle a laugh. Anna felt the gaze, but didn't look away. Neither seemed in any hurry to break that gentle, tentative silence, as if they were both walking barefoot through a strange house for the first time. Children ran across the dusty yard, laughing, each inventing their own happiness. It was just another Friday, but for them, it felt like a colossal beginning. A boy with holes in his shoes fell by the gate, holding back tears, sneaking glances to see if anyone had noticed. Anna went to him, kneeled down slowly, smoothed his hair, whispered to him. Miguel watched from a distance, thinking how much he still had to learn. To be that calm, to have that gaze that doesn't judge, no matter what life has done to the person. She came back smiling. He's fine, just wanted a Band-Aid with a dinosaur on it. I promised I'll bring him one tomorrow. Miguel couldn't hold back. You always make promises you know you'll keep. I don't think I've ever seen that before. Anna blushed, just shrugged, but gripped his hand tightly. In that quick squeeze, he saw the story of the two of them. The time it took for her to trust a man again, for him to believe he wouldn't just disappoint someone else, to learn the value of the small stuff. Even the wind felt different in the village. Some people passed and waved at him from afar. Others just stared, curious. It wasn't that cold, tense silence of the first weeks, nor that old, icy suspicion. There was respect now, an awkward way of saying, "We see you for who you are, not just what we were told." Miguel remembered the pain of the bad days clear as day. Anna's face when she uncovered who he was. The giant shadow of his past, that fear. Will love survive fear? Now, there in the schoolyard, it wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about living. Fully. Inside, he felt everything at once. Gratitude, a touch of sorrow for everything left behind in the city, but above all, a tremendous relief, as if his own name finally fit him again. He didn't need to pretend, or explain, or run. There, in that simple life, Miguel was just himself, and it made him quietly, deeply happy. Out of the blue, he sat down with Anna on a stone bench, the shadows from the school windows sketching odd shapes across them. They fell silent for a long while. A bird pecked at a leftover lunch on the ground. He rested his head on her shoulder, breathed deep. Anna stayed still. She looked at his hands, now marked from work, fingernails dirty from soil. There were so many questions there in the quiet, so many unspoken doubts. Didn't he regret giving up everything? Did she really deserve someone who believed in her when no one else did? He turned to her. I thought about leaving, you know, lots of times. But the more I thought, the more I felt it was too late for that. That there's no Miguel without this place, without you. It's strange. Sometimes I'm still afraid it'll all fall apart again. But then you hold my hand, and everything makes sense again. She looked at him, slowly. Almost cried, but stopped herself. It wasn't sadness. It was such a huge relief it ached. We survived. You're here now. So am I. I think that's all that matters. He smiled, and in it there was a trace of the boy he'd been. The fear had become something calmer, like a scar that doesn't hurt but still remembers. She leaned over, rested her forehead on his. And it was in that silence, feeling each other breathe, that they understood the past hadn't beaten them. Nor had it killed the love, the kind that grows in the dark, that defies everything. Pride, guilt, wasted time. The children brought Anna wildflowers, filling her lap. Miguel pretended to grumble, pulling little twigs from her hair, and for a second, the weight of their lives seemed to vanish. By midday, there was no talk of justice or old accusations. Just two people, as vulnerable as any school child. They laughed quietly, spoke even less, but the desire to stay together was stronger than anything. So there they remained, on the hard bench, holding hands, fear finally nothing more than a memory. And they stayed, watching the simple joy of the children, the scent of earth in the wind, a future entirely made of small promises. This time, promises they knew they could and wanted to keep.